After planning to show Precious how serious he was about her, Mr. Lee decided to make his first move the next morning. He bought beautiful bundles of roses and approached her office with a determined look. "Good morning, Precious," he said, greeting her with a warm smile, holding out the roses. "These are for you." Precious' eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't help but feel a surge of happiness and chemistry as he handed her the roses. However, she quickly composed herself and shook her head. "Thank you, Mr. Lee, but I can't accept this," Precious said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Mr. Lee's smile faded slightly, but he respected her decision. "All right, Precious, if you ever change your mind, I will be here for you." Precious nodded, her resolve firm. She was determined to keep things professional and maintain her distance, despite the undeniable chemistry between them. As she walked back to her desk, she whispered to herself, "I won't fall in love with my boss." A few days later, Mr. Lee decided to try another approach. He invited Precious to dinner, hoping to spend more time with her outside of work. "Precious, would you like to join me for dinner tonight?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. Precious hesitated, her mind racing for an excuse. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, but I already have plans with my friend Hannah tonight," Precious lied. Mr. Lee's disappointment was evident, but he managed to smile. "I understand, maybe another time." Precious nodded, grateful for his understanding, but very firm in her decision to maintain her distance. She knew that keeping things professional was the best course of action, even if it meant pushing aside her feelings. As she walked away, she whispered to herself, "I won't fall in love with my boss." That evening, Precious was waiting outside for the rain to stop before heading home. As she watched the rain pour down, it only seemed to increase. Filling the streets, frustrated and tired of waiting, she decided to brave the rain and start walking home. To her surprise, she suddenly felt someone covering her with an umbrella. She turned to see Mr. Lee standing beside her, holding the umbrella over both of them. "Mr. Lee?" Precious said, shocked by his sudden appearance. Mr. Lee smiled warmly. "I couldn't let you walk home in the rain, Precious." They continued walking together, the rain creating a romantic and intimate atmosphere. The tension and chemistry between them was very visible as they stared into each other's eyes, the world around them fading away. Their faces inched closer, their breaths mingling in the cool air. Precious' heart raced, and she felt a magnetic pull towards Mr. Lee. The rain seemed to create a cone around them, isolating them from the rest of the world. "Precious," Mr. Lee whispered, his voice very audible over the sound of the rain, "I can't stop thinking about you." Precious' eyes widened, her breath cutting. "Mr. Lee, Call me June," he interrupted gently, his gaze never leaving hers. Their faces were now millimeters apart, the tension between them almost unbearable. Precious could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips, and her heart pounded in her chest. Just as their lips were about to touch, Precious suddenly turned her face, and June's lips brushed against her cheek in a lovely, gentle kiss. The touch sent shivers down her spine, and for a moment they were lost in a world of their own. June's hand gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing against her skin. "Precious, Before he could finish, Precious pulled back, her heart racing and her cheeks flushed. I need to go," she stammered, hurrying away while blushing. Mr. Lee watched her go, a soft smile on his lips. He knew the connection between them was undeniable, and he was determined to show her that his feelings were genuine. As she rushed home, Precious kept repeating to herself, "I won't fall in love with my boss. I won't fall in love with my boss." A week later, Mr. Lee approached Precious with an important request. "Precious, I need you to prepare to go on a business trip with me. We have an important meeting with a client out of town." Precious felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Of course, Mr. Lee, I'll make the arrangements. After the business meeting, it was late and they had to spend the night there. Mr. Lee took Precious to a nearby hotel. She felt anxious because of the intense chemistry between them, and she didn't trust herself if they had to sleep in room like in the K-dramas she often watched. Mr. Lee noticed her unease and reassured her. "Don't worry, Precious, I have booked 2 rooms for us," he said. Precious felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Lee." They entered their separate rooms, but Precious couldn't help but feel a sense of longing and confusion. As she settled in her room, she whispered to herself, "I won't fall in love with my boss." After taking the relaxing bath, Precious changed into a comfortable nightgown. She was about to settle into bed when she heard some sound outside her room. At first, she just ignored them, thinking it was the usual hotel noise. But then she heard a loud sound that made her jump. Feeling a surge of anxiety, Precious rushed out of her room and knocked on Mr. Lee's door. "Mr. Lee, are you there?" she called out, her voice shaking. Mr. Lee opened the door and Precious immediately hugged him tightly, seeking comfort. "I heard a loud sound and I got scared," she said. Mr. Lee led her into his room, closing the door behind them. "It's all right, Precious, you're safe here." As Precious calmed down, she realized that Mr. Lee wasn't wearing a shirt. Her eyes widened and she quickly tried to pull back, but Mr. Lee held on to her. "Stop running from me, Precious," Mr. Lee said, his eyes locking into hers. The chemistry between them was intense and they couldn't stop themselves. Their face inched closer and the air around them seemed to sizzle with electricity. Finally, they shared passionate kiss, their emotions pouring out in that moment. June's hand gently caressed her back, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. Precious' finger traced the contour of his shoulders, feeling the warmth of his skin. The connection between them was undeniable, and they were both lost in the moment. Mr. Lee pulled back slightly, his breath shaking. "Precious, do you want this? Tell me to stop before it is too late." Next episode. "Precious, do you want this? Tell me to stop before it is too late." You see, June was just using you. He would never marry someone like you. His parents would never let him marry a poor woman. You're just a distraction. Realize she hasn't seen her period for 2 months since her night with Mr. Lee.